And this ceremony will take place just hours after President Trump addressed ongoing talks to end the war with Iran. In a Truth Social post, he said all Middle East nations are taking part in discussions should, quote, immediately sign the Abraham Accords or not be part of the deal. Yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said an agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz could be reached soon.
We're still a work in progress. As I said, we thought we might have some news last night. Maybe today. I wouldn't read too much into it. It takes a little while to hear back. So we have what I think is a pretty solid thing on the table in terms of their ability to open up the straits, get the straits open, enter into a very real, significant, time-limited negotiation on the nuclear matters. As the president said, he's not in a hurry. He's not going to make a bad deal. I mean, the president's not going to make a bad agreement.
But the Iranian regime is tempering expectations of a solidified deal. A spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry said today the Trump administration is causing, quote, problems and obstacles with frequent changes in positions and contradictions. Meanwhile, CBS News senior White House reporter Jennifer Jacobs is exclusively reporting that Iran's supreme leader is currently holed up in an undisclosed location. U.S. officials say he has little access to the outside world and can only be reached by couriers. CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion joins me now from the White House with more on this story. So, Nikole, what are we hearing with that possible deal with Iran? What is the White House saying here? And what's actually in that draft?
Well, again, I think we're still in this mode of deal or no deal. What we do know is that it appears that both the U.S. and Iran have reached some consensus around a few principles, if you will. In fact, just yesterday, a senior administration official said there wasn't an agreement in principle between both sides, although overnight Iran said no deal is imminent. But what we have learned, according to a draft of a memorandum of understanding that we have reviewed, is that the general outlines of this deal would be, for instance, that Iran, of course, must commit to giving up its nuclear weapons. That has been a key objective of the president. Of course, this would also be on the condition of having a 60-day extension of the current ceasefire so that the U.S. and Iran could negotiate the parameters, if you will, of how, for instance, Iran might dispose of its enriched uranium. So that is one part of this. And then the other condition to this is that Iran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and that in turn the U.S. would likely lift its blockade on Iranian ports. Also, Iran, U.S. and allies agreed to end all military operations and refrain from threats and using force. So those are some of the terms according to this MOU. But again, still remains unclear how close the U.S. and Iran may be to signing some type of deal. As I mentioned, Iran has already said that nothing is imminent. And even U.S. officials acknowledge that if a deal is finalized, it could still take a matter of days because, to your point, with respect to our reporting around the supreme leader, he is holed up at an undisclosed location. So any sign off, of course, has to go through him. But just the process of reaching him through this series of couriers could take some time to convey the terms of this deal, to get approval or not get approval, and then to communicate that back to the United States. So there's still a lot of moving pieces and parts here. But certainly the good news is that both sides still appear to be talking.
You know, Nikole, just want to ask you quickly what lawmakers, particularly Republicans, are saying about this potential deal. What would make this a success?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there has been some pushback from lawmakers, even within the president's own party, from the likes of Senator Lindsey Graham, although ultimately he says he supports the president's objectives here, to folks like Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina are among those who have been kind of critical of this deal. You know, the big concern here is that obviously everyone wants to get out of this war, but there is concern that in terms of the terms of this deal, will this be any better, for instance, than what the Obama administration negotiated previously in terms of the JCPOA, which, of course, the Trump administration got out of that agreement. So was it worth having this war just to get back to the point where we were previously? That's really the general concern that both Republicans and Democrats have expressed. However, the president has really pushed back at his critics, in some cases calling them losers, saying they don't know the terms of this deal.
Okay, Nikole, Killion at the White House, thank you. And a reminder, we'll show you live coverage of the president marking Memorial Day in Arlington, Virginia, once that wreath-laying ceremony begins. And for more now on the back and forth with Iran, we're joined by CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab in Tel Aviv. Imtiaz, lots to break down here. What is Iran saying about this potential deal?
Hey, Chanel, good to be with you. What is Iran saying? That is the question. Look, Iran is essentially pumping the brakes on things a little bit. Over the weekend, it really felt like a deal was imminent, that they were going to sign something in the next 24 hours or so. And now it feels like we might not see something happen until the end of the week. But as you were saying in your introduction, our Jennifer Jacobs has some really interesting reporting about why things are moving so slowly from the Iranian front. And a big part of it has to do with its supreme leader. You'll remember the former supreme leader was killed on the very first day of this war, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. His son was installed soon afterwards. But we haven't seen Mojtaba Khamenei at all. We haven't seen from him. We haven't heard from him. All we've had is written statements read out loud on state TV. And in Jennifer's reporting, we've basically found that essentially he is being sent communication through a series of couriers, which is why it takes a while for him to respond to it. That said, I've been hearing from my sources inside Tehran that so far anyways, the supreme leader is responding relatively positively to many of the things that are being agreed. But as Nikole pointed out, and I think it needs pointing out again, what we will see, if something is assigned, is a memorandum of understanding. The really thorny things like Iran's nuclear profile, the Strait of Hormuz, that is going to be negotiated in real detail over 60 days. And there's a potential that that could be extended again. So I know we've been talking about a lot about Iran over the past several months, Chanel. We're probably going to be talking about it a lot more.
And Imtiaz, I want to ask you about this because President Trump now calling on regional allies there in the Middle East to join the Abraham Accords as part of this effort to get a deal done with Iran. How is that going to impact those talks?
I think it led to some pretty interesting dinner conversation in several of those countries. Look, I also think people here in Israel were pretty surprised to hear it. You have to remember a number of these countries that are part of this group of Arab and Muslim majority countries that have been working with President Trump and Iran to try to get some deal together and end this war include Pakistan, which doesn't even recognize Israel, which includes Qatar, which Israel sees as, frankly, an enemy state. So Israel itself may not want some of these countries to be part of the Abraham Accord. But I think the real reason why President Trump is talking about it is because the Abraham Accord, at least in his previous administration, was really the crowning jewel in his foreign policy achievement. And the Iran war will probably be remembered as one of the more challenging aspects of that history. And so I think if he's able to get some more countries to join the Abraham Accords, most notably Saudi Arabia, that would certainly be a shiny jewel in that crown.
All right. Imtiaz Tyab in Tel Aviv, thank you.